So I've got a couple of things to talk about. I'll start off just with the vendors. That's my job, talk about the vendors. So for those who've come to the events previously, we recently, the last couple of events, 2-3 events, we introduced the concept of vendors. The concept being that we invite typically ancillary organizations to the sector. So not so much care providers, but or allied health or support coordinators, but ancillary. So we've got, and we also then introduced the concept of a charity. So every event we now going forward, we want to involve a charity. Last event was Bill Cruz, hence the food, Bill Cruz Foundation. And we encourage anyone who would like to donate food to that charity, which focuses on homeless, but also assists persons with disability. Please bring food along. We'll organise to get the food to them. We have a charity, and we also this time, for the first time, have introduced the concept. I shouldn't talk about concepts. We've introduced a participant vendor. So an NDIS participant who has set up a business. So I'm going to introduce the names now, and I'm going to then hand a mic to each to do a quick pitch. And then please feel free to see them after and speak to them all after the formalities of the panel. So we've got Vinci Software here, and they'll talk about what they do. We've got CPG, which is Certification Partner Global. We've got YZ, who have been a vendor here before. And we have Waves of Wellness, which is our charity, our new charity for this month. And we have Victor. Where's Victor? Victor's in the middle there. Victor's our participant vendor. Round of applause for Victor. So we're going to get each of you up one by one to talk about your organisation. So it might start with YZ.
No problem. Thank you. So my name is Aaron Price. I'm from the YZ training system. We've got 80 plus NDIS modules, all of the mandatory training, complex care, role-specific training that your staff might need. You can access it all for free through our website and get everybody trained up. Very simple system. They can access it on their phone, and you guys can track compliance through the system as well. So thank you.
And Waves of Wellness.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kate. I'm from the Waves of Wellness Foundation. We are a surf therapy charity, a mental health surf therapy charity, and we run surf therapy programs for free for people all over Australia. And yeah, we're all about taking therapy and mental health support out of the grey spaces into the blue spaces and fostering that connection and healing through nature.
And Vinci?
Yeah, Vinci. No. Hi, I'm Ilona from Vinci. We're a CRM platform focused on patient care. So start to finish of a patient, the life cycle of the patient can be managed from within us. And we're very focused on automation and compliance. So, yeah.
Thank you. And CPV?
Hi, I'm Di Wild from Certification Partner Global. We are a certifying body. We're an auditing body, so please don't throw things at me. We've been in the certification industry since 1995, and we've been in the NDIS space since 2019. Prior to that, from 2002, auditing from the very first disability pilot program. So we understand that nobody really likes an audit. Okay, nobody goes, oh, yes, please, me, I want to go. So some people do that. So what we try to do is go, okay, you have to have an audit to get something out of it. Yeah, you need to have some value to come out of it. You don't know what you don't know until you get into an audit. Okay, the auditors are out there. They've seen so many things. Utilize their experience. Okay, so the NDIS is not an easy scheme to navigate. It's complex. It's complex for us as auditors as well. And we're constantly asking questions. So you're not on your own, but we are very nice.
Thanks, Di. And Vika,
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm Victor. I would like to present Stone Capital and Stone Cleaning. We're a property-based service business, and we provide financial loan products and domestic cleaning for NDIS participants. So I basically created strength cleaning because I basically have 5 years experience of cleaning, and I would like to leverage that experience to create a strength cleaning. And I also created strength capital because I work for a mortgage broking firm. And yeah.
You have a mentor?
Yeah, I got a mentor. Yeah, thank you.
For the mortgage broking business?
Yep.
And you have a mentor as well, generally?
Yep. Thank you.
So, yeah, after the panel, please feel free when you're networking to come and see our vendors.
Just before I get into a little bit more technical details, just a quick rundown. So basically, we've got a Q&A panel, which I'll let the lovely panelists introduce themselves. So we're going to go through the hour or so long discussion. One thing I want to make sure is that we're going to let them introduce themselves, explain their experiences and so on. But if you guys got questions, that's what we're here for. So please yell them out, ask questions. Or if you've got something you want to add to the conversation, put your hand up and we'll come around and hopefully in time for a mic. If not, just yell really loud. And then, yeah, so I might hand it over to Earl because I think what we wanted to do before we get started is just kind of give an update of where things are up to now with mandatory registration.
Thanks. Yeah, I just made some notes earlier because this was just thrown in, but yeah, I think it is relevant to give everyone. Many of you might have some background, but just a bit more background on this particular topic, which is mandatory registration and the importance of quality. So the topic's being formalised and addressed by recommendations to the government and the NDIS and the Quality and Safeguards Commission in relation to the need to improve quality in service delivery and care. The recommendations have been informed by surveys, submissions, independent reports, etc. There's a joint standing committee in Parliament that is, I guess it exists permanently, and it's also taking feedback from individuals, representatives of organisations, peak bodies, all sorts of stakeholders, and particularly participants. The standing committee exists to cover many topics and discussions, so it's not just mandatory registration and quality. Its main themes of focus have been choice and control, co-design, and the sustainability of the scheme. It's just literally, this is very topical. I think most of us would be hearing about it or reading about it, but the annual report was just released this last week by the Joint Standing Committee. And there are some really, for people that really get into reading Hansard reports, there's some very interesting topics. Obviously, mandatory registration is one topic, but other topics of interest include thriving kids, which many of us know about, funding periods, fraud, rural supports, Indigenous community, cultural diversity, and other topics. So there's some really interesting stuff in there. And in relation to this topic so far, there's, everyone's worried or wondering what's going to happen. There's still no timings, even though they've set broad timings on when mandatory registration will be introduced. But what does that mean? What I can see so far is the immediate way forward. The conversation seems to be focused on SIL, and they put in brackets high intensity, support coordination and platform providers. So the higher ups, the Mabel, those sorts of platforms. But it's interesting, and others here would be more knowledgeable than me, but high intensity seems to be bracketed next to SIL. So it doesn't seem to be its own separate topic for general providers. It is a topic, but it doesn't seem to be the priority at the moment. And I think that's because, I won't say why, but I think there are many reasons why. But I think I'll leave it there, and I'll then leave it to our experts to talk further. Thank you.
Great. So before I hand over to the experts, just a quick show of hands and a quick question I'm interested to see is who here thinks that mandatory registration will improve NDIS, the quality across the NDIS? Hands up if you think you do, if it does. Perfect. I obviously understand that it's a nuanced question. There's a lot of complexities to it, but which I guess we'll get into. But okay. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Laura first to introduce herself, and her experiences and so on.
Excellent. Thank you. Lovely to see you all today. So my name's Laura Camish. I'm the General Manager for the Caring Group. And so we are a national organisation that consists of about 80 different businesses across the country. We have a combination of aged care and NDIS. And in the NDIS space, we provide support to participants across a whole range of different areas. So through, as Gil was mentioning, SIL, core support coordination. So my role is looking at quality and compliance. So it's really interesting when we think about compliance and we think about what's important about that and why do we need to have a focus, one as an organisation, but two, and probably more importantly, to ensure that we're delivering safe and effective care to our participants in their homes. And so for me, my passion is really looking at how we can educate and work with not only our network, but beyond, to be able to ensure that when we are delivering services, we're really looking at the participant and what their care needs are and how we make sure we're meeting those care needs as best as possible. So I was excited to hear about this topic. I work closely with Earl. He's part of the Caring Group. And so I was really excited to be invited to come along and share my views and experience in that space. So I've been with the Caring Group for about 10 months, so relatively new in this particular role, but have been in quality and compliance for about 15 years and then have an allied health background that has kind of led me to this space. So that's a bit about me. Thank you.
So my name's Debbie Eisenhower Rodney. Oh, excuse me. I'm the CEO of Australian Community Industry Alliance, or ACIA. So ACIA has been around since about 2005 and was established with grant funding from iCare, who recognised the need for a quality framework for people who had experienced traumatic injury. And by 2008, in conjunction with their panel of providers, they developed the first set of quality standards, the Australian Community Industry Standard. That's a JASANTS endorsed practice standard. So that now is in its fifth iteration, so we're up to ACCUS 5.0. And we have two schemes that mandate that all their panel providers are certified against our standards, and then quite a few other schemes make a recommendation that their service providers be accredited to ACCUS or Australian Community Industry Standard. So the Australian Community Industry Standard has around about a 63% equivalence with NDIS practice standards. And most of the providers who are certified against ACCUS are also NDIS registered or certified against the NDIS practice standards. So we've designed or written a scheme in such a way that we provide for a concept of equivalence. So a service provider hasn't got to provide evidence twice for the same quality indicators. So we try and make it as efficient as possible. But the standards go a bit further than NDIS practice standards. We have a clinical governance standard, trauma-informed care, more of a focus on complex physical supports. And because a large part of the cohort of people who are covered by these standards have experienced traumatic injury, and that's how they've acquired their disability, they do have some capacity for recovery. So some of those elements are built into the quality indicators within the standards. So from my perspective, I came into the disability services sector in 2011. I'm a bean counter by trade. I started with an organisation called Ability Options, who were a bit of a trailblazer in person-centred support back in 2011. So I think they were one of the organisations that trialled self-managed funding prior to the rollout of the NDIS. And we're a strong advocate, and part of the Every Australian Counts campaign, and really advocated for the rollout of the NDIS. So I've been on that journey with a couple of organisations. I then worked for DSA, who's now Scope, and helped with the change management process they needed to go through to align with NDIS requirements. Was a CEO of an NDIS service provider for a few years, and now with Australian Community Industry Alliance. So I've got quite a bit of experience with the NDIS space, even though I'm working adjacent to the sector. I'm very passionate about quality and the experience of the individual receiving care.
Thank you. So now we're open to questions if anyone has one. If not, I've got some that we can start conversations. Oh, there is one over there.
Hi, Manuel. My name is Faisal. Just regarding the question that you started before you handed the mic over to the table there, regarding who he thinks that having a mandatory registration will help, my immediate thought was there's no straight answer to that question. If you have a provider with the right policy and procedures who follow their policy and procedures and follow compliance, then mandatory registration is just a tick box, I believe. But there are a lot of registered providers who aren't doing the right thing. To give you an example, in the last 2 years, I'm very sure everyone here has noticed a lot of big providers shut down due to failed audits and compliance issues. So, how do we find a fix? Even with mandatory compliance, we've seen issues, but it's better to have the mandatory registration than not, I believe, because there's some sort of regulation on the provider. But there's no straight answer, and I'm looking forward to what our panelists have to say about this point.
Oh, pressure's on, and I didn't like the expert. That's a little sweeping statement. I think if that's the case, we're all experts in this space. Thank you, Faisal. I think it's a really great point. Obviously, leading the business in quality and compliance, I'm really passionate about policies and procedures. Not particularly exciting material, however, is a requirement. We need to have this in place. I actually agree with you. If we have a process where we can ensure that we have the right policies, procedures, and training, that actually, that's safeguarding our workforce and safeguarding our processes. And I also agree, if we have that extra check around mandatory registration, it really ensures that businesses are doing what they say they're doing. And, the likes of our auditors here would be experiencing that when we're identifying those gaps and concerns, and then how we actually put into practice improvement. I think in this industry, there's always opportunity for improvement. There's always a focus on how we can improve what we do, how we can ensure that we're taking feedback on board, and what that actually looks like in practice. The last thing that I want from a policy and procedure perspective is to be another tick box, to go, yeah, we've got that because we need it for audit. Now, we've got quite a large aged care sector industry perspective as well. So about half of our participants, which is about 6,000. So we've got about 12,000 participants across both aged care and NDIS. Aged care, their registration process is quite different, and their auditing process is quite different. And so I think if we move to a model where we are not just having a tick box, but having what is the end user experience, that is the person that's in the home, how do they understand and implement? That's what I want to see.
I was just going to take a slightly sort of more macro, make a more macro comment in relation to this discussion, and that is, I do believe that mandatory registration and compliance with quality standards will help improve quality, but then there are other moving parts that impact quality. So, for example, as you would all know, unit pricing. Does the unit price that you receive for the hour of service allow you to implement the supervision and training that's required to comply with your own policies and procedures? So that's a big issue. And then, you've also got to think about the role of the commission. What's their accountability? So, you as an organisation, you have an audit. The certified auditing bodies make a recommendation to the commission, and then you hear crickets for months and months. So, there's a whole lot of pieces in the whole ecosystem that need to come together to really raise quality for the participant. And mandatory registration is one of those moving pieces.
Yeah, okay. This will help you view this.
Thank you. So it might be a dumb question because I'm fairly new in the industry, but like Faisal said, so many providers are shutting down and all that. I was just thinking, my perspective is like, if the registration has to be mandatory, there has to be a criteria. The people who are experienced, sort of some experience in the industry itself, they should get the registration or the license rather than anyone can go has an ABN and a driver's license and file the registration and that they get approved for it. Looking at the side of the participants, so when they know that how they have already got some sort of experience, I think these are the people who can build the business more reliable. I think I'm sound little bit biased, but what I believe what is happening in the industry that might can help, but it's just a thought that I would like to share, and I would love to have your comments. What do you think? You guys are more experienced, are more than welcome to shed some light on it. Thank you.
So just reframing the question. So are you saying that you feel experienced providers should be registered, or are you saying the end user or participants should? Can you just clarify?
So the people who are applying for the registration, they should have some sort of experience or qualification in the industry.
Yeah.
Maybe the community work, or they have worked with the disabled people in the aged care, some sort of experience they should have, so they understand like how things work. And when they're establishing the business, they're being like more mindful, more careful of what are these standards. So they have sort of bit of background of that. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I think that there's layers of expertise within a service provider. So you've got the support worker level, and you would need to think about, well, what is the right level of skill, competence, and experience for a support worker versus a team leader or somebody who is working in an operational capacity, in IT or HR or risk management within the organisation. So there's all the different layers of skills and qualifications that will come into an organisation. I guess where you're looking at platform providers or people who are sole traders, what is the right level of skill, experience, and qualification for those people? And I guess that's where the discussion around mandatory registration for platform providers, you would hope that should be an element of that registration process, like who is allowed onto that platform and what would that requirement be?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's looking at what the experience is, and there would need to be a process around registration as opposed to, anyone can just apply and be registered and now be a provider. I think that you would be looking at, what your experience and background is and how you can ensure that when you're delivering service that you're considering the participants' need, and it's not just an opportunity to step into the space and possibly create a business at the potential risk of the participants. So having requirements around that registration process, I think, would be part and parcel of the process that we need to put in place.
So a lot of registered providers on sale as a business, right? So I know that there are companies that are professional in getting the registration and then putting it on for sale. So I don't know which body should be doing some sort of regulation for that. If you can buy the registration with all the documentation, it means very little for passionate people who are in the sector.
Before I hand it over, I think it's one of my thoughts on that is I've been through 4 or 5 audits, and I know I think Dee was saying, "Oh, no one enjoys an audit." I kind of do. I do. I actually, I am a little weird in that way. I mean, I do because it gives me an insight into what's working, what's not. There's an actual standard that I'm trying to achieve, and we have discussions about what we can be doing better. We have ideas on how do we make things, more effective for the participant. But I think ultimately what I learned out of that is I know every step. I know what we're doing well, every process from beginning to end. I know how it's affecting the participants. And I think that's a part of the comments that we're saying. You have to know, at some level, someone in the organization has to know. That's my 2 cents.
I love that we've got an extra panel, man. Right, it's not just up to us, a new expert right here.
Any questions for Emmanuel? So to look at your question that you just mentioned, I think you're exactly right. There, it loses the value if you can purchase a registration. I think that definitely takes away what the intention of implementing a system around mandatory registration would be. I think that then there needs to be a criteria, and we need to ensure that people that are involved in the sector are there for the right reasons and are providing care to participants. Similar to Emmanuel, I don't mind an audit, although I tend to have to coordinate a lot of it, so it can be a little bit daunting at times. But to the point that I mentioned before in regards to Faisal's question, it's not just having a policy procedure process in place for the sake of audit. We have to think about how it then is implemented into practice and how do we ensure that what we're saying that we do, we actually do. Because I'm sure that our audit friends would have had the experience where everything looks really good on paper, but when we go and talk to a participant, that's not the experience that they're having. So how do we ensure that what we say we do is being delivered and we're delivering the care that we're implying that we are?
So our scheme is much smaller with, a smaller number of registered providers, but we do require when there's a significant change in personnel or ownership of an organisation that we are notified, and then we will do a review of the potential impact on organisational governance, and we'll work with the scheme funders to decide what additional work we need to do to give them the assurance that they need that the clients are still going to receive the right level of care. And it may be that they have to have an additional surveillance audit to make sure that, all of the policies and procedures and personnel are in place and know what they're doing. How that would work in the NDIS Commission, I don't know, because of the scale and the way that compliance is approached. So, yeah, it's not no easy answer.
Obviously, compliance and risk are very important, and so always should be considered. And I think you hear the stories about safety issues. However, I think that I'm interested to know how you guys think about dignity of risk within that concept, because I think it's the downside of having people so focused on compliance and risk is that it can actually lessen the type of support that should be delivered for capacity building or just for general purposes, as we're dealing with a lot of human beings and adults in terms of it. So interested in your...
Yeah, that's a great question because I think consumer choice and their ability to make choice in what activities they want to be involved in is so, so important. We are about, working alongside, not delivering a service. We're here to support the process, and how we actually come along that journey with our participants is a really important aspect. I'm a really big believer around choice and control in the care that's being delivered, but also the activities people are engaging with. I think from we are a registered provider, so from a registered provider perspective, looking at how do we put in place strategies to manage the risk and ensure that the consumer has an understanding of what that risk means to them. And that's where that choice comes in. So being able to say, actually, I understand that risk. We've put mitigation strategies in to manage and support you in your choice, but essentially it's your choice. That's my position. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting question. I don't know that registration and compliance with the quality framework necessarily prevents, dignity of risk. It's actually a quality indicator in both NDIS and ACCA's practice standards. So it means that there's a requirement to build that concept into your procedures and also train your staff on the concept of dignity of risk. An unregistered provider doesn't have to do that. So I don't know that registration necessarily is will prevent people from being able to take their own risks. Yeah.
I have a quick question for Debbie. I'm just interested because, look, I should know, but roughly how many? It's a double-barrel question. So roughly how many participants are under the accident transport schemes nationally, by comparison with the NDIS? And then I'll follow-up question depending on your answer. Just right. Well, no, not really depending upon, but it's a flow-on question.
Yeah, I think, well, between iCare in New South Wales and MAIB in Tasmania, where we do have some visibility of numbers, I think it's between 5,000 and 6,000 participants.
So that's what I thought, and I should know, but because I used to be on the board. But so when you compare the two schemes, you're talking about 5,000 to 6,000 versus 700,000. So I guess it's an interesting being an onlooker off to the side, seeing, I guess, ACUS or the scheme is a much more pigeonholed, controllable scheme in terms of dealing with the stakeholders. Obviously, there's participant feedback in the same way, but the NDIS is a much more complicated scheme. So how do you feel sitting on the side, seeing all of that and maybe trying to make sense of what they're dealing with and the challenges?
It's like looking into a black box, but it's look, I think the NDI, both the agency and the commission have been poorly funded since inception and were built on the fly. So we all know that, and they're trying to fix things as they go. And then there's a constant churn in key personnel. So they're just losing historical knowledge over and over again. You know, I think for the commission to work effectively, they just need to look at their model of oversight of quality and compliance. I just don't think it's sustainable at scale, which is why they're failing in so many areas. Even though we're smaller, and we have a much simpler model, which seems to work quite well. We put a little bit more faith in our certified auditing bodies, who are all JASANTS endorsed, and from my experience with the organisation, we're very impressed by the quality of the auditors and the work that they do. So JASANTS is the joint accreditation scheme for Australia and New Zealand. So they audit the auditors. So they're a government-funded body that accredits the certified auditing bodies or your audit firms, plus the scheme and standards. So we have for our standards, we have an overarching scheme which governs how the standards are implemented and interpreted, and that complies with ISO standards like the management standard, which same as NDIS. So there's a certain way of auditing, a certain way of sampling, a certain way of risk assessing different aspects of the audit, and it's quite a rigorous process. So to have a scheme and a set of standards approved by JASANTS, and for a certified auditing body to be approved by JASANTS, there's a lot of rigour. And we witness audit the certified auditing bodies, and so does JASANTS. So there's a lot of scrutiny on the certified auditing bodies. So why not put your faith in them? And, if they make a recommendation for certification, accept that recommendation. So which is what we do. We don't safeguard, but we share information with the scheme funder, and that information sharing is much more timely than information sharing between the commission and the agency and service providers. So I feel like we make quite a good contribution to the safeguarding efforts of the scheme funder just through that close communication and timeliness. But it's an interesting question. Or like sitting on the outside looking in, I'm just thinking, why are they doing it like that? Because it just it's probably what the Auditor General thought too when they issued their last report, because they just don't have like a risk assessed approach to the way they're doing things, and they just don't have the capacity to operate in the way that they are effectively. And so then when mandatory registration comes in and they've got to scale up, I don't know how they're going to be able to cope when they're not coping now. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Thanks. I'm Peter from the Co-Group. It just seems as I'm listening that we're talking a lot about registration, but registration really means compliance. And if I think about the unregistered provider, very small entry-level provider coming in today, that registration with that quality built in is a big ticket dollar item, a barrier to entry into the market. Yet a small provider with a very low staff number could provide excellent service without the policies and procedures. If we looked at any other sector, as a business grows, it will decide at a point in time to go for a quality accreditation, which is completely separate to registration. And when I think about registration, that's a safeguard, right? To be registered, you need to be found if there's a complaint. And the problem with unregistered providers is they predominantly can't be found. So if you just have a simple registration process and you can be found, then you can be questioned as to the quality of service that's being provided. And then there's not a barrier to entry to building your own business. It seems to me that the registration process has been tied with compliance, with quality accreditation right up front, which is a big system for a big company. Works for big companies that have got hundreds of employees, maybe not even that many, tens of employees that need a quality system to assure that their people are doing the right thing out of the front line. And that's self-regulation, right? It's about you monitoring your own performance so the complaint doesn't ever get to NDIS because it's being dealt with in a sensible way by that organisation. But that's about quality. So should quality and registration be in the same deliverable belt? Are we going to force those two things together? It seems to me that there is an opportunity for a discussion around a registered, very simple registration process to be able to find a provider without having quality tied to it at that very early stage of business. I'd like to hear a comment around that, and I fully accept that big organisation with hundreds of clients and you're facing that quality issue, but putting the other hat on for the small provider, how do you feel about that?
I think that's a really valid point, and I think that it does get tied together. Quality and registration do get tied together. But I actually really appreciate that comment because it gives an opportunity to step up. I feel as though the point you make around being able to find a provider if there is an issue, that's the bit that's missing. So we do have some of those backyard providers that might not be doing the right thing, and how do we ever know they're not doing the right thing, and how do we ever put measures in place to protect what can be vulnerable participants at times? How do we put those measures in place? So having an opportunity to have oversight around that, but then them build as their business builds, I think is an interesting idea. I think to the point that was made before around how do you scale these things, when there's challenges, and how do we ensure that it becomes managed and we do have that continued oversight would be something that might be a challenge to implement. But I think it's a really valid point. Thanks.
I think there's real merits in a progressive certification model that's aligned with registration. I wouldn't support registration without some type of certification because, you do need to have some minimum standards around, training of your support workers, managing and reporting incidents as they arise, so you do need to have some processes in place. We, like our industry or our organisation sometimes gets contacted by unregistered providers who are working with participants who are outside of the NDIS, and we've had instances of organisations contacting us saying, look, we're supporting somebody with an acquired brain injury and we're not sure what we should be doing. It's what do we do? Like they're not certified to our standards, they're not a member of the organisation, how do you guide them? And there's nowhere for them to report or seek help or advice or guidance on how they should be supporting those participants, even what to charge them. And so, it's a bit of a wild west, and somebody, especially for somebody that's acquired a disability and they're new to the space, they don't know what good care looks like. And it's quite difficult for them to navigate the space. So I think with registration, a progressive certification model, yes, and that would need to be tied to the complexity of the people that you're supporting.
Yeah. I've got a question. Actually, would like to continue the discussion that Peter's raised about the feedback and complaints. As I'm Ivania from Care2, we always wanted to improve our service. We're a seal provider, and I guess the feedback and complaints process procedure is really important as we have like changes within the NDIS. We always wanted to be compliant, and we always want to listen to participants, make sure they feel seen and heard, have the right tools to gather the feedback. We do have placement students that do like in-person interview every 6 months. I find that could be more could be done. It could be a tool that's online that's sent through automatic emails for feedback, or like online form being developed. And this probably question for both of you, that are there any tips and strategies that around the feedback or complaints handling that could be shared with us as the provider? I think the registration would probably did something to regulate some unregistered providers. However, I guess the process of around that complaint feedback is also like really important if we want the industry standard to be lifted, and participants also need to know their rights and what they can do if things doesn't go in the right direction, and would there be anything that could help with that?
Yeah, thank you. I am also the person that loves complaints. So because it ties in so nicely, you can relate, yeah. So it ties in so nicely to one, being able to hear what's happening and being able to really value the feedback that's given, or that's being provided, and it ties into continuous improvement. So in all of the quality roles that I've had, I've managed and overseen our complaints management process and our incident management process across the business. There's quite a few things to do, and I think what's really important is that we ensure that participants have, we welcoming feedback, and we need to ensure that they have that opportunity to provide feedback in lots and lots of different ways. So we've recently implemented a QR code, which means they can scan that in and at any point in time can send direct feedback to us. So we have that in our seal properties, we have that on our statements, we have that on any communication that we share with them. So we're really giving them the tool to be able to provide that feedback. So a QR code and a URL, which they can provide that feedback at any point in time. They can also choose to be anonymous, which I think is really important. We need to give our participants the opportunity to give us feedback in an anonymous manner. It's also the concept of open disclosure. It's definitely used a lot in the aged care industry. I'm not sure if it's a familiar term to anyone in this room, but open disclosure means that we're welcoming feedback, regardless of what that is, without any retribution to the participant. So we will take on board that feedback, and we will ensure that we do not change the service. We don't get cranky. We've all got participants that have a lot to say and have a lot of feedback to provide us, but we welcome that as an opportunity to improve what we do. For me, it's a mindset shift. So I think that when we think about complaints, we go, oh, that's bad. A complaint's a bad thing. We don't want to hear that. For me, if you shift your mindset to be a complaint is an opportunity for us to look at how we can deliver a better quality service, it changes how we feel about complaints and feedback, even to the point where we don't call them complaints, we call it feedback, because we want to take everything on board that you're willing to provide us, because you're the person, or the participant's the person that is having the experience. So how do we make sure that the experience is the best quality it can be? So there's a couple of tips, QR code, URL, have it linked to a central inbox that's monitored. You can collate that. You can then also look at some trend analysis and data to be able to say, oh, this month we received this type of theme. What are we going to do as a business or a provider to put an improvement in place? What does that look like?
So not a lot I can add, but I was just, probably the only things I could add is easy access to independent advocacy. So just really ensuring that, all of your participants know how they could connect with an advocate if they want to provide or want support to be able to provide feedback and complaints. And the other thing that you could think about is, how do you engage your participants in organisational governance? I know it's a little bit more of a not-for-profit concept where you might have participants, sitting on a board or a committee, but I think that's really important. And if anybody's not doing anything next Friday afternoon, at our AGM, we have Dr. Shane Clifton presenting. He's a person with lived experience of disability, and he's doing research into including people with a disability in organisational governance. And his co-presenter is a person with an intellectual disability who actually sits on a board currently. So I think that'll be a really interesting presentation. That's at the eye care premises. You have to register to be able to get into the building, and there's free food and drinks after the AGM.
Can I just add around that point around participant engagement, across at that board level? So what we have implemented recently is a consumer advisory group. And so that group is a collection of consumers that have wanted to be involved. And so this is opportunity for them to be involved in, understanding processes and understanding how it's going to impact their service provision. And I think what has been really lovely to see is the interest and uptake around that advisory committee has been really lovely. So that committee directly reports into our board. And so, and the board then has the responsibility to take on board the feedback that they're providing. So that's another suggestion to consider how you can really, not just take the consumer voice, but actually do something meaningful with that.
I've got a couple of questions as well that I'm going to ask because I know we're going through time, but just my comment on feedback is indirect feedback. A lot of people think feedback, you have to wait for a complaint to happen. If you're involved, especially smaller providers, if you're involved in conversations and you can hear conversations that are happening, you can probably hear little bits and pieces. But, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And often that's an indication for me to say, hang on, you should know that. And that's something we look at in terms of our process. And I guess from a registration perspective, my take on feedback has always been about the ability for the end user, let's call it, or the participant to have a say on how that is actually being delivered to them. So all of these bits and pieces just mold your process, for lack of a better word. That's my 2 cents, and I'm not an expert. So I guess I just wanted, because we do have, and if anyone else has any questions, please definitely raise your hand. But there's one interesting question that a couple interesting questions actually, but one that I wanted to kind of ask is, we've talked a lot about what it should look like and different layers and the nuances, but what problem is mandatory registration aiming to solve? Like, what in the industry, what is it actually solving, or what is it aiming to be solved? Either from the NDIS's perspective, I guess.
We're talking from the NDIS.
Well, I think from the NDIS's perspective, it's trying to crack down on fraud and wants visibility of the service providers in the sector. But I think, what it should be aiming to address is, the experience of the end user and supporting and protecting those people who are most vulnerable. And there are many people with disability who can advocate for themselves, but there are many who can't. And if you think about, the stats in the NDIS space, well, I think it's around 70% of people have got a cognitive impairment who are funded by the NDIS. In the personal injury space, lots of people have got acquired brain injury as part of their injury. So it makes those people a little bit vulnerable, and we just need to ensure that we're doing everything we can to provide a marketplace that they can rely on. So they know that if they look for a provider and they find a provider, that provider knows how to support them, has trained staff, will have their best interests at heart, and will really help them to get the best possible outcome. So I guess in my mind, that's the problem that we should be trying to solve.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is really looking at how do we ensure that when we're providing care and service to participants, that they can have a surety that the provider knows what they're doing and has their best interests in mind and is protecting them and advocating for them when they can't. And when they can advocate for themselves, they hear that as well.
I guess my follow-up question here is what could be messed up if we get it wrong? So I know mandatory registration is coming. I don't think, yeah, it was a follow-up. But so I know it's coming. We all know it's coming, right? And we all know there are potential flow-on consequences from that, whether it be the commission delaying registrations or, participants in regional areas not having access to people that are registered and so on. But like, I guess, I know it's an open question. Maybe other people in the crowd have an answer as well. But what could happen if they get it wrong? Or maybe what's an important thing that they should be thinking about when designing?
I think that scalability that we've started to touch on already is going to be a really important aspect. As we already know now, and I'm sure the auditors have this experience as well, is when we go through that audit process for providers that have a registration, it can then sit in the department for, I think I've got one at the moment that's 18 months. 18 months is sitting there waiting to be approved. Now we've gone through the audit. We've ensured that we meet all the requirements. So we're taking that on face value to go, yep, we're good. But it's not actually coming across through the system. And so that in itself is problematic. If that's the current state, how do we then build by saying we want to have more registrations in place and we want to have that scalability? So I think that in order to have that process, one, they probably need to clear the backlog that they've got out and make sure all of those providers that have got their audit reports in that they get an outcome either way, and then to ensure that they can actually work to scope moving forward.
Well, there won't be enough auditors, so we know that. Not enough good ones. Not enough at all, and not enough good ones. We've written our scheme and the last iteration of the scheme to align with the NDIS audit cycle, so that our providers who are certified against ACCIS and NDIS can do their audits at the same time. We just can't make it happen because we've got the cycle working, and then the NDIS audit happens, and they're waiting 18 months and they still haven't got an outcome. So it's just a bit of a dog's breakfast, really. So so what could go wrong? Well, what's already going wrong might just get worse. And again, that goes back to Earl's question and my rambling response around just the Commission's model. Like, I think they just need to rethink how they're managing the compliance process to be able to make it scalable. I just don't think it can be scaled the way it's operating at the moment.
Oh, can I just ask, and I'll give it to you, Teresa. So yeah, that was a perfect segue, because for me, there's different lanes here. So there's lanes we're talking about care providers, platform providers, support coordinators. But there's other lanes that we haven't talked about, like allied health. We know that allied health generally have their own governing accreditation bodies. There's also, we talked about participants, self-directed, who have a say. And I think, and then there's many other flavors involved here as well. And so the problem is, it's such a big scheme that these conversations are flying around, and it doesn't feel like they're going to land. So I don't know. For me, the answer, and it's not really an answer, but they've got to keep it simple and then chip away. But I don't know how they do that. So sorry, just a comment.
Well, we sat on a consultation earlier this week, end of last week, with KPMG, who are doing the consultation around the new quality standards, and the person facilitating, I think, was 12. But I'm just kidding. It's like the depth of knowledge and experience of the person that's facilitating the consultation. I'm just thinking, well, there's so much history and there's so much complexity within these questions and the way this consultation should be managed, and I'm just not confident that that's actually happening. So, and I don't know if you've had that same experience. Yeah.
I am a specialist support coordinator, and I run a team of support coordinators. So my mind is swimming with so many questions, but I'm going to try and keep it short.
my biggest concern, I mean, luckily we're a registered provider, and the owner of the company has had the funds and the know-how to be able to kind of get us set up from the beginning. But I also have been connected with a lot of independent support coordinators who are doing brilliant work. And more I'm seeing independent support coordinators and other services turn away participants who have minimal funding, or say, you know, we're not going to work or bring on a participant with any more than this many hours, because financially it's not worth it with all of the compliance, with everything that we have to do as, well, we're not a small business anymore, but all the small businesses who do have to kind of get started, it's too much. And I think that really is at fault and really sacrificing those participants who do have smaller plans. And more the NDIS is tightening those funding amounts. I mean, how many times have we seen a participant, you know, 1.5 hours every day for support work, and trying to find a support worker who's willing to work that shift. So I guess how it seems like the NDIS is sacrificing small businesses in these cases, but also making it harder for participants to engage with supports when they do have that small amount. I just want to hear your opinions on this, and how we expect these small businesses to survive. I guess I found it really interesting what you talked about before about, you know, paying for registration, but you know, the amount of hours that a small business has to put into, maybe they don't have the time to sacrifice to figure it out themselves. Maybe they need someone to come in and give them the answers so they can move on from there. How do small businesses manage this?
It's a really valid question, and I don't have a clear answer. I think that's a whole nother scope of discussion that we could go down that path. But I think you're right. I think it's looking at how do we ensure that participants still have choice and still are getting a good quality of care, and we don't want that to be at the cost of people that are already providing those care services in place. So yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting when I met with Emmanuel and Earl, he's like, there's going to be some support coordinators that aren't registered and they're going to have a really strong opinion. I'm like, okay, that's okay, because I don't have a different opinion around that. To me, it's all about quality. How do we ensure that what we're putting in place is a quality service and is consumer driven? I think that, you know, historically we have seen, you know, some of those worst case scenarios where there are rogue providers that aren't delivering quality care or taking advantage of consumers. And I think that that's why the NDIS are looking at tightening those regulations. Is there an easy way to do that? I think it's pretty much unanimous that it's not going to be easy. It's probably going to be messy. And it's also likely that some small providers might not be able to fit the model as it is. But that's not to say that the model is stuck that way. I think that there will be movement in the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because, like, you know, if you look at, and I'm not quite sure what the agency's thinking is, because, you know, if they haven't had a price increase for NDIS and support coordinators for X number of years, like, what are they trying to do to that particular market? And it's really hard to understand what their strategy is, because the navigator concept that they've talked about, I have no idea how that's going to work. And I don't think they really understand the value of support coordination and how much support coordinators actually do. I think plan management is a whole other piece, and I think that's been really open to manipulation and fraud. And, you know, I'm not quite sure what the answer is there. I just think support coordination is a very valuable and should be a valued role. I think it should be priced according to the value that it delivers, which is higher than, you know, what you're currently getting for your hourly hourly rate. But that then should factor in, though, if they want to have mandatory registration for support coordination, they need to put that into the unit pricing. So there needs to be, you know, some value. You know, if they want quality, then they've got to value quality. So they've got to pay for quality and value the role of the support coordinator. So I think there's a whole lot of pieces. So, you know, registration on its own doesn't drive quality. Registration, pricing, you know, valuing the right services and, you know, getting the model right, all of those things, you know, it's a whole ecosystem that needs to come together. So yeah, it's a difficult space and there's no easy answer.
I know we have a question, but I just wanted to quickly comment. Because obviously I'm a support coordinator as well. It's a operational question as well as it is a registration question. So like a lot of organizations are going to have to make or really look at their model and see, is it working? Can I make efficiency improvements? Anyone, I'm sure you guys are the same. You've looked at your model. How do we make this work? How do we support those participants in those situations? It's also an NDIS question. Why aren't you funding enough? And also, I guess it's a collective question, because are we giving enough information? Are we providing the right information? Are we answering the right questions all together? The other thing in terms of unit pricing that I noticed and I was mentioning is when I was reading through the IPC document that looked at pricing and seeing what it looked like, they don't know. But I don't think it's just them. I think it's also us. Like sometimes we accept things, if that makes sense. Like we're supporting a provider, a participant, and we have to push back. There's a lot of information that I don't think they understand the difference of quality for the price, so they're hesitant. And we know that I think it was 70% of support coordinators, for example, that are unregistered. So they're trying to see what they do. But sorry, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Hi. So this question is specifically about support workers, right? So, while we value choice and control, people who are plan managed or self-managed can use unregistered support workers, and they don't even have to do the NDIS workers check. They don't have to have first aid. They just have an ABN and off they go, right? And personally, I have had clients who were, treated badly, even though they chose the worker. And there are also workers that say, well, you really need 7 hours on a Sunday, and and I will charge you the double rate and so forth. So in my mind is that if mandatory registration is not happening, and we do give people choice and control, how do we actually have a platform or a way of protecting these poor participants who think they know how to look after themselves, but they actually don't? And it's not about advocates. The advocate can't be there when they convince the client to sign off 7 hours of Sunday rates. So I think the agency or the commission has to have another layer to protect the participants.
I think they've kind of started, from my understanding, the My ID thing that they're doing, that anyone who's operating in the NDIS has to have some kind of connection with My ID so that they can track. Because I think a lot of the comments around unregistered providers is, how do I follow through and find that person, or whatever the case may be. So I've noticed, and I think I'm assuming here a little bit, but the My ID process, the way they're changing RAM, everything is connected through there. So they're trying to have connections to find if something does happen. I mean, but a lot of us, especially us, we've put complaints into the commission and it's out of jurisdiction because they're not registered. So, but
Question. So, going on that point, who's accountable, right? So it's a plan manager pays bill for that candidate to order about. Is it the plan manager or the support coordinator he chose to pay, put them together?
Well, the person may not have a support coordinator, and they may not have a plan manager. They can just be self-managed, and the support worker just took advantage of the guy or the girl.
I think it's you're asking a question that depends on context. There's a lot of context there. I mean, it could be a joint. It could be the support coordinator didn't provide enough information. The participant made a particular choice. You now go into dignity of risk and what their decisions are in that moment. It could be, for example, plan manager missed something. Who knows? It could be a lot of different bits and pieces there.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I want to say this is my first event, and I'm really learning a lot. So I'm from Wish Health and Disability. We are a registered provider, and also from Audit Docs. So surprisingly, we've been using CPG since we started, and I'll say they do amazing job, so which is really good. What I want to know is, because we've been registered from the start, I really don't really know the difference between a registered and unregistered, apart from not being able to claim from Proda. So if you guys can let us know a bit of the difference between a registered and unregistered, that'll be great.
Just a disclaimer, it's probably going to be our last question, but thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to touch on the support worker question for a moment, because I think that's a really important question to raise. And I'm really passionate about ensuring that we are, we have the right checks in place when we're putting support workers and providing care. The NDIS worker screen and check is there for a reason, to ensure that we're delivering the care that we should be providing. So, and that the individual has the right training and experience to provide that. So on balance, that choice and control piece, and ensuring that the worker has the right requirements. I think, for me, it sways towards making sure they have the skills and requirements. In regards to the question that you've asked, looking at, the difference between unregistered and registered, I think that it's really looking at, from a registered provider perspective, they need to ensure that they've got all of the right compliance aspects in place. They go through the audit process, as you've mentioned you've been through. It's also ensuring that we've got that trail that is followed in regards to not only claiming, but how we access participants, how we deliver support and service to those participants.
Sorry, how do non-registered reporting Zs and stuff?
Yeah, they don't. They don't. Yeah. So, and the whole, for some reason, and this was part of the scheme design back in the beginning, they decided that they would have 3 ways a person could manage a plan. One was agency managed, one was plan managed, and one was self-managed. And if you plan managed or self-managed, that allowed you to use unregistered providers. And so more and more people decided, I'll use a registered provider for this, but then, I want to go and do something on the weekend. Like, I want, to go to the footy with someone, and the big provider doesn't, allow that. And so they would maybe plan manage some of their funds and find somebody on Mabel or higher up to go to the footy with, and that sort of worked. But then over time, because there's so much money coming out of the NDIS, a whole lot of organisations saw an opportunity to make a buck in the disability space. So then you get all these unregistered providers coming in, potentially setting up plan managed agencies, and then, directing people to their own services, and, the whole fraud thing happening. So, so that design, which was meant to give people a little bit more flexibility in the beginning, has created this bit of a mess that now the NDIS is trying to clean up. So that's how the unregistered market evolved. So people that were plan managing or self-managing could use whoever they wanted, and it was always meant to be for those sort of, I guess, community access type activities, or, supported holiday or something like that. But it's sort of gotten out of hand. Yeah. Yep.
Emmanuel, can I just, before you wrap up, I just want to plug Deb and ASIA, because, look, our business, as a small business, we joined ASIA. We're not an eye care provider, but we joined ASIA because we recognise that they have a mature set of standards and policies that members have access to. So that is a big advantage for us. So we look at those policies, we use those policies, we refer to them. The other advantage, I would say, is I think most of us have tried to reach out to the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission from time to time with questions, and it's a pretty much one-way street. If I try to parallel somewhat what ASIA does, you actually can ring up and get an answer. You can get advice. So again, a plug, there's material there. So I would encourage you to definitely speak to Deb and maybe join ASIA. And also please make sure you speak to the vendors afterwards. But that's from me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for everyone, and maybe a round of applause for the amazing panelists. A massive thank you for everyone for coming again. Next month then will be the last event for the year, because we're taking a bit of a break in December. Also, it's Christmas, and I don't think anyone wants to be here as much as everyone might like me. I said might. Thanks, Javier. So in November, the conversation will be around technology in the NDIS. So we're diving into what that looks like, how that may impact us, especially with all the registration and stuff happening. So, but other than that, thank you so much. I don't think I missed anything, and there's food. Let's everyone chat, and I'm going to do some interviews, so I'm going to annoy some people. So thank you.